If someone had told me that staying quiet would one day cost me my job, I would have laughed. I wasn't quiet because I lacked confidence. I was quiet because I preferred solving problems instead of creating them. For almost 9 years, I worked as a senior systems analyst at a software company in Chicago. Most people in the office barely knew my name. They knew the sales director. They knew the marketing team. They definitely knew our CEO, Richard Collins. But very few people knew what I actually did. And I preferred it that way. While everyone else argued in meetings, I was the one fixing the systems that processed customer orders, tracked software licenses, and connected thousands of clients to our platform every single day. I didn't invent the company. I didn't own shares. I wasn't an executive. I was simply the person who understood how everything fit together. My manager used to joke that if I disappeared for a week, the company would stop breathing. I always smiled and told him he was exaggerating. Looking back, he wasn't. Everything changed after Richard announced his retirement. At the annual company meeting, he introduced his replacement. His 28-year-old son, Kyle. Kyle had an MBA, expensive suits, and unlimited confidence. What he didn't have was experience. On his first day as CEO, he called a meeting with department heads. "I want fresh ideas," he said. "I also want to remove people who have become comfortable." The room became quiet. He wasn't talking about improving the company. He was talking about replacing people who had been there longer than he had. Over the next month, 3 experienced managers resigned. 2 others were dismissed. Every position they left behind was filled by someone Kyle already knew. A college roommate, a cousin, a golfing friend. People started joking that you needed a family photo to get promoted. Nobody laughed very hard. One Monday morning, I received an email asking me to attend a leadership meeting. That surprised me. I'd never been invited before. When I walked into the conference room, Kyle was standing at the front with a tablet in his hands. He smiled when he saw me. "Daniel, thanks for coming." I nodded and took a seat. He didn't. Instead, he stayed standing. "I've been reviewing employee records. 9 years. You've never managed a team. You rarely speak in meetings. You don't seem interested in leadership." I waited. He continued. "I think you've become too comfortable here." I finally asked, "What exactly are you saying?" He smiled politely. "I'm saying today's your last day." For a moment, I honestly thought he was joking. He wasn't. The HR manager quietly placed an envelope on the table. Inside was my termination letter. The reason? Position no longer required. That didn't even make sense. My position wasn't disappearing. They were replacing me. Kyle looked around the room. "I want everyone to understand something. This company rewards people who step forward. It doesn't reward people who hide behind computer screens." A few of his friends left. Nobody else did. I signed the paperwork without arguing. Kyle seemed almost disappointed. I think he wanted a scene. Instead, I stood up, thanked everyone for the opportunities I'd been given, and walked back to my desk. As I packed my things, several coworkers came over. One whispered, "This is a mistake." Another quietly asked, "What are we supposed to do now?" I shrugged. "You'll figure it out." The truth was, I wasn't worried. Not because I had another job waiting. Because I knew something Kyle didn't. 3 years earlier, our biggest client had insisted on a custom licensing system before signing a long-term contract. The company asked me to build it. I spent almost 8 months designing the platform. But there was one condition. I refused to transfer ownership of the underlying framework without a written agreement protecting my intellectual property. The company's legal department agreed. The software they use every day belonged to the company. But the core framework, the engine that powered future custom licensing modules, remained mine, licensed exclusively to them under a renewable agreement. It wasn't a trick. It was a contract everyone had signed, including Richard. Kyle had never bothered to read it. He didn't even know it existed. As I walked out of the building carrying one cardboard box, I looked back only once. 9 years. Reduced to a security badge that no longer opened the front door. I handed it to the receptionist. She looked genuinely sad. "I'm sorry, Daniel." I smiled. It isn't your fault. Outside, I took a deep breath. Then my phone buzzed. It was an email. Not from the company. From the legal department representing our largest client. The subject line read, "Urgent. Licensing renewal meeting." I opened it. The first sentence made me stop walking. "Our records indicate your licensing agreement expires in 48 hours. And we have been informed you are no longer employed by Collins Software Solutions." I slowly looked back at the office building. For the first time all day, I realized they hadn't just fired me. They had forgotten to ask one very important question. Who actually controlled the license they needed to keep their biggest client? I didn't reply to the email immediately. Instead, I drove home, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat on my back porch. For the first time in almost a decade, I had nowhere to be. No emergency calls. No system failures. No executives demanding impossible deadlines. Just silence. An hour later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed the company's legal department. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. By the fifth call, I answered. "Hello. Daniel, this is Karen from legal." Her voice sounded nervous. I heard. There was a brief silence. "So, you've already spoken to someone?" "No. I just heard." She sighed. "Can you come in this afternoon? We'd like to discuss something. I'm no longer an employee." "I know. This isn't about employment. It's about the licensing agreement." I looked out at my backyard. "I'll think about it." Before she could respond, I ended the call. 2 hours later, another call came. This time, it was Richard, the retired CEO. Not Kyle. "Daniel, I'm sorry about what happened." I appreciated that he called. But his apology came too late. I warned Kyle not to rush into changes. I stayed quiet. He wants to meet. I don't. He doesn't understand what he signed. I almost laughed. No, he doesn't. The next morning, industry news broke that Collins Software Solutions had secured negotiations for its largest contract renewal in company history. The announcement made shareholders happy. Unfortunately, no one inside the company realized the software license supporting that contract expired the following day. At 9:12 a.m., Karen called again. This time I answered. "We need you here." "Why?" "Our client won't sign. They've asked for confirmation that the licensing framework remains valid. And they've requested that confirmation from you. Not from Kyle. Not from the board. From me." When I arrived at headquarters, the atmosphere had completely changed. Yesterday, security had escorted me out. Today, the receptionist stood up the moment I walked in. "Good morning, Daniel." Several employees looked relieved to see me. Some even smiled. One whispered, "I knew they'd call." I smiled politely, but said nothing. Inside the conference room sat Kyle, the legal team, the CFO, and 3 executives from the client company. Kyle forced a smile. "Daniel, thanks for coming." I nodded. One of the client's executives extended his hand. "We've worked together for years. I was surprised to hear you'd left." So was I. A few people quietly smiled. Kyle didn't. The client opened a folder. Our legal department reviewed the licensing agreement. It states that any renewal must be approved by the intellectual property owner. He looked directly at me. "We'd like to continue working together, as long as you're comfortable renewing the agreement." Kyle quickly interrupted. "We own the software." I calmly replied, "You own the software. I own the licensing framework. Those are 2 different things." Karen slid the contract across the table. She knew I was right. She had helped draft it. Kyle leaned back in his chair. "So, what do you want?" I looked at him. Yesterday, he couldn't wait to get rid of me. Today, he couldn't complete the biggest deal of his career without me. I answered honestly. "I want respect." He frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means you fired people before understanding what they actually contributed. It means you assumed being quiet meant being unimportant. It means you never asked questions. You only gave orders." The room was silent. Even Richard lowered his eyes. The client executive finally spoke. "We're not interested in internal disagreements. We simply need stability." He turned toward me. Would you be willing to continue licensing your framework? Yes. Everyone relaxed. Then I finished my sentence. Just not under the current terms. Kyle's expression changed instantly. What do you mean? I opened my laptop. For the past 3 years, I had improved the framework on my own time. Faster processing. Better security. Fewer outages. I wasn't asking them to buy something new. I was offering an upgraded version. The previous agreement reflected the company's size 3 years ago. It has grown. The value has grown. So the agreement should grow too. The client nodded. That's reasonable. Kyle didn't. This is extortion. I calmly looked at him. No. This is negotiation. Yesterday you told me I wasn't valuable. Today we're discussing exactly how valuable my work actually is. Richard finally spoke. For the first time since the meeting started. Kyle. Stop. His son looked at him in disbelief. Richard sighed. You've spent a month trying to prove you're the smartest person in every room. You forgot the first rule of leadership. Kyle looked confused. Richard continued. Know who keeps the lights on. The room fell silent again. Karen handed everyone revised documents. The client reviewed them. After 20 minutes, they signed. The contract stayed with Collins Software Solutions. The client kept its platform. And I received a new licensing agreement that finally reflected the value of what I'd built. I never returned as an employee. I never wanted to. Instead, I became an independent technology consultant. Over the next year, I signed agreements with several companies, including some of Collins Software Solutions' competitors. Ironically, I ended up working with Kyle again. Only this time, he wasn't my boss. He was my client. And every invoice he approved reminded him of one lesson he learned the hard way. You can replace a job title overnight, but you can't replace years of trust, knowledge, and experience with a single act of nepotism. If you were Daniel, would you have gone back to work for the company, or was becoming independent the best revenge?